All right, assalamu alaikum. May the peace and blessings of God be upon all of you. Welcome to everybody here. It's customary for Muslim gatherings to start with the recitation of Quran or a prayer, basically. So for that, we have a student with us. His name is Daniel Siddiqui. He's a student at UTD studying biomedical engineering. He's going to be opening with a short recitation from the Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى أن رآه استغنى إن إلى ربك الرجعى صدق الله العظيم.
The translation of these verses, which were actually the first verses revealed in the whole Quran, are as follows. Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot of congealed substance. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man that which he knew not. Nay, but indeed man does transgress, because he sees himself as self-sufficient. Indeed, to your Lord is the return. Thank you again, Daniel. We mentioned that he's a student at UTD. He also happens to be what's called a hafiz of the Quran, which basically means he has memorized the entire Quran from end to end. So we're very proud of him to have him in our community. That was Daniel Siddiqui. We'll go ahead and proceed with the rest of the program. Once again, may the peace and blessings of God be upon all of you. My name is Syed Ahmad. I'm basically the outreach coordinator here at the East Plano Islamic Center. On behalf of the whole organization, as well as the board and management, I'd like to welcome all of you to this Educator Appreciation Day. We apologize, it's a little bit crammed in this room and we don't have huge space, but as I think all of you have seen the huge facility outside, we've been working very hard on that for the last few years to get that ready. There's a huge demand in this area for more space, but we even discussed in our own committee meetings having or possibly having this event each year, making it an annual event. So hopefully we'll accommodate you in that big building next time. All right, so in any case, why are we gathered here today? There are several reasons. Number one, there is something common between all of us here today. I'm sure all of us know and realize that having a quality and balanced education is not only essential for all of our children, but essential for ourselves as well. The philosopher John Dewey once said, "Education is not preparation for life, but rather education is life itself." Benjamin Franklin also said, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest." So this was the first reason. The second reason is the members of the East Plano Islamic Center would like to express our strong and sincere thanks, appreciation, and gratitude to all of the teachers, professors, and administrators, not only who are here, but who are also outside of here, who are making such a significant impact on all of our kids' lives, and therefore our lives. Our faith, Islam itself, puts a tremendous emphasis on seeking knowledge from the cradle to the grave, as well as on the importance of being thankful and grateful for our blessings. And these blessings certainly include our education as well as our teachers. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also said, "He who does not thank people does not thank God." So this was the second reason. A third reason relates to the fact that through such events, and it may be a small event, but we'd like it to be at least a stepping stone where our community members can interact with educators in the area, as well as for educators to network amongst themselves. Fourthly, we want to chow down on some good Mediterranean food. All right? Let's face it, that's got to be another reason too, right? So in any case, you know, if we think about it, I'm sure you all realize this, but here in our wonderful state of Texas, and in fact our nation itself, we know that things are changing very rapidly. And in fact, that's probably an understatement. But just to give you a few examples, in 2014, we now know that in California, the Hispanic population now exceeds the white Caucasian population in that state. In Texas, Hispanics are now expected to outnumber the white population in 10 years. What about right here in our neck of the woods in Plano? As I was looking up statistics for our school district in PISD, and we have several members of the PISD who know all of this better than I, but I was looking up statistics just at the changes from year 2000 to 2010. The demographics has changed as follows. Asians have gone from 10% of the student body to 17%. The Hispanic population of students went from 10% to 20%. They doubled. African Americans went from 3% to 10%, while the white population decreased from 91% to 51%. Now, some people may hear some of these statistics, and let's face it, some people may have a heart attack when they hear some of this, right? Others may hear these statistics and have a heart warming. But the fact is, all of this diversity that we see here in our schools should be viewed as a strength and not something to be feared or hated. I, just like most of you here today, look forward to hearing from our very knowledgeable speakers who are here on my right and left. So without further ado, I'm going to proceed with the program. Before we have lunch, we do have our religious leader with us. His name is Imam Nadeem Bashir. He wanted to say a few words before we get to our lunch. So you're holding us back from lunch, right? All right. But anyway, just to give you a little bit of background on him, Imam Nadeem Bashir was born in Florida, and at the age of 4, he came running to Dallas, right, to the Metroplex, in fact, the Arlington area, right? In 1989, he went to Pakistan as a child, where he memorized the entire Quran by the age of 11. He has a master's degree in Islamic studies from Dewsbury in the United Kingdom. He's taught Arabic, Quran, and Islamic studies at the Islamic Association of North Texas, as well as the Qalam Institute. He also used to be the imam or religious leader at the Islamic Association of Colleyville. I know on a personal note, he's a very diehard Cowboys fan. And I think in another life, he probably would have been a linebacker for the Cowboys. But without further ado, here's Imam Nadeem Bashir.
Assalamu alaikum, and peace and blessings be upon all of you. I just want to first say that I thank you so much to all of our guests being here today, all the teachers and educators, for taking time out on your valuable Saturday morning. You could be with your families, you could be with your children, and I know as teachers, you know, teaching is very exhausting. I mean, it's you get those kids in your class like, you know, I wish I see this kid outside of class. And then you see those kids, you know, you have those kids who are very good in class. And so you always get those different kind of students. But then you always look forward to that Saturday morning where, you know what, I can sit down peacefully, I can have a good breakfast, and then I can have a good lunch, spend some quality time with my family. You know, I teach in a school too, but I want to thank all of you for taking time out on your Saturday morning and being here with us. I was meeting some of the guests earlier on, and one of the reasons that we've had this, you know, Mr. Sayyid was just mentioning that why we're holding this event is just to create a better understanding and just to appreciate one another. As human beings, we need to appreciate one another, and the more we appreciate, the more we value each other, I think this will create a better understanding. This will create a higher level of tolerance within ourselves. You know, you have within human beings, you have those who are knowledgeable, those who have education, and then you have those who are ignorant. And we have to combat ignorance with education. It goes without saying that I know a lot of you have studied history, you teach history, so you will agree when I say this, that when we go throughout history, we learn that when you compare educated civilizations compared to non-educated civilizations, there is a huge difference in terms of their success, in terms of their progress. And when we go through the life of Arabia prior to Islam, we find the same thing, that there was a lot of ignorance that had spread throughout the entire earth. Not only in that area, but there was ignorance everywhere else. And especially talking about the pre-Islamic Arabia, I mean, it was so, the ignorance was at such a high level that people were fighting over small and minute issues. People were, there were battles and wars over small matters. And this is why God understands and realizes that in order for people to understand and in order for people to make a progress in their life, education is key. Without education, we cannot move forward. You know, in life, we talk to our students, we teach our students that education leads to a higher income. When you have a good income, that really dictates what type of social circles you're part of, what is your social life consists of, and then not only that, but how you socialize with others and who you are around, that really dictates how you think also. You can, I mean, honestly speaking, we all think differently. We all have different mindsets. We all have different ideologies and philosophies. But we do realize one thing, that people who are educated, they are more tolerant than people who are not educated. And that's why in the very beginning, when God even sent down the Quran, you remember when our young brother here, young man here, Daniel, when he was reading those verses of the Quran, these were the first initial verses to be revealed. And if you actually study the Quran consists of over 6,000 verses. 6,000 verses, and you can imagine the very first verses are not about God himself. Yes, it does talk about God, but it does not talk about anything about religion. It just talks about education. Education. And in the very beginning, I remember going back just like 10, 15 years, we never had social media, okay? We never had people, you will not see students coming into their classrooms with their laptops, the Microsoft Surface Pro 3, whatever it may be. You don't see them typing out their notes. They would always read and write. This is how they would acquire knowledge. This is how we acquire knowledge. We never had computers. I mean, we may have had computers, but we were not in the habit of typing everything out. Today, unfortunately, when I go to school, and I teach at a school too, when I see senior students, when I see junior students, and they cannot even write, like their writing is like chicken scratch, okay? That's what it is like. You know why? Because slowly and gradually we're losing the legacy of reading. Reading has started to become a lost legacy. Writing has started to become a lost legacy. And what we need to do is that when we go back to the Quran, we realize that this is what God was emphasizing upon. If you did listen carefully, he mentioned the word iqra, iqra, iqra. You know what iqra means? For those of you who don't know the Arabic language, it means read. Read, read, and read. Why? Because reading is one of the key components to education. Number two is that the Quran in itself is called the Quran. Why? Because it is a book that is read over and over again. That is why the Quran is called the Quran, because it's read over and over again. Then there was another word that he recited in the recitation, which was allama. Allama means in the Arabic language to teach. So another key component of education is not only do we read books, but we teach. And this word allama in the Arabic language, it has been structured in such a way which implies that you not only just teach once, but you are continuously in the process of teaching. You teach, and you teach. Think about this. How are we educated today? How are we educated today? There was a process. There was a process. People learned, they became teachers, they taught the next generation of students. Then that generation of students who was one time taught, they became teachers, and then they taught the next generation of students until knowledge has reached us today. And that's why we need to continue this process further on. Finally, in the recitation, there was another word that was used, which is the word qalam. And the word qalam in the Arabic language means pen. So God is telling us basically that education is very important, education is vital, but there are three things that we can do to acquire that education. One is teaching, one is reading, and one is the usage of the pen. Writing is very important. Now in Islam in itself, there's such emphasis on knowledge, there's so much emphasis on knowledge that because of time I cannot go into all those details, but within the Quran and within the prophetic traditions, the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, we will find many sayings and many Quranic ayat which reflects the importance of what are the etiquettes of a teacher and what are the etiquettes of a student. Because, you know, once again, as being teachers and educators, one thing we do know is that, and one thing we do teach our students is, the one who is respectful, the one who respects the teacher, the one who respects the knowledge that they're learning, they will always be the ones who will really benefit. And they're the ones who will really capture the essence of knowledge. And if there is no sincerity, if there's no respect, they will come to class, they will study, but they will gain nothing out of it. They will gain nothing out of it. So that's why even in the Quran, God mentions very clearly, قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. It is impossible that a person who's learned, a person who's educated, cannot be on the same page, and they're not equal to the one who is not educated. They're two entirely different people. So that's why even in the Quran there are some other stories about Moses, and that reflects the importance of how a student should behave and how they should observe the proper etiquettes in front of their teachers. Once again, the reason I'm mentioning all this is because Islam stresses upon education. Islam stresses upon respect for the education that we are learning. Islam emphasizes upon respecting the people from whom you're taking this knowledge, because if we have respect, and something else which is very important is sincerity, as long as we have these two things, we will continue this process and continue this legacy. But the minute we lose these values, then education will stop with us and it will not proceed forward. Having said that, I will conclude. Once again, I just want to say to all of you, once again, thank you so much for making us part of your day. And if you have any more other questions about knowledge regarding the Quran or the prophetic tradition, I'm here to answer any of your questions after the event. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Imam Nadeem. Before we do proceed to the lunch, I did want to take just a few minutes to mention some of the special guests who are here with us, who RSVP'd ahead of time. So what I wanted to do was basically just call out your names, and if you could please just go ahead and stand as I call them out, and then we'll, at the end of that, have a collective applause for you. So basically, let me call out some of these names. I apologize if I get any of them wrong. First name is Steve Fortenberry, Interim Superintendent and Chief Financial Officer of PISD. Go ahead. Yeah, actually, if you could keep standing, what I'll do is I'll read off all the names, and then we'll have one big collective applause. How about that? That'll be easier because there's a lot of names I have here. Thank you. So I'm sure you won't get tired. All right. We have Nancy Humphrey, President of the PISD Board. We have Marilyn Hinton, also a PISD board member. Do we have Mike Friedman with us? Yes, also a PISD board member. From UTD, we have one of our speakers. She's here with me to the right, Dr. Jillian Duquesne Watson. We'll be introducing her later. Is Dr. Shelley Lane here from UTD? Dr. Zafar Anjum, Professor of Arabic at UTD. Is Anna Nicole here? I don't think she is, okay. Dr. Michael Phillips, who's also going to be one of our speakers. He's from Collin College. Is Stavisha Evans here from UTD? Sure. Dr. Lawrence Miller, Professor of Political Science from Collin College. Michelle Domenech, Professor of English, Collin College. Is Dr. Yasmin Ansari here? I don't see her. He's coming? All right. From Wiley High School, Lisa Sudak, math teacher. Anita Murak from Wiley High School. Susanna Milhone from Wiley High School. Nice to have you. Brian Alexander from Wiley High School. From Williams High School, Lisa Dela Cruz, assistant principal. Not here, okay. Ruth Bernabo from Williams High School, history professor. From Murphy Middle School, I know we do have Dr. Brant Perry, principal. Jill Enkelgink, from assistant principal, Murphy Middle School. Alina Isbell, Murphy Middle School. Mesa Inaya from Macmillan High School. Mary Ann Morrow from Murphy Middle School. Is Thomas Martinez here from Murphy Middle School? No, I don't think so. All right. Lori Lisobi. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Is she here? Oh, very good. You're hiding back there. All right. All right. One of our other speakers, Dr. Shazia Ali from Richland College. Or sorry, Eastfield College. Sorry. Adjunct, right, at Richland? Adjunct? Okay. All right. Thank you. Dr. Sobia Khan from English professor at Richland College. See, that was the Richland one, right? All right. Mohammed Diwan from Islamic School of Irving. Dr. Adnan Omran from the Brighter Horizons Private Academy. Dr. Uzma Khan from Good Tree Academy. Okay, yeah, she's here. Dr. Syed Farid Ahmed. I know some of you may be laughing. He actually happens to be my father. Some of you are giving me fake looks. Not allowed. He actually has 40 years of teaching, and both in the U.S. as well as in a number of other countries. Zafar Sharif, Professor of Mathematics at Richland College. There we go. From Harmony High School, Annie Pack. Also from Harmony, Ozkan Ablak. Also teachers. Dr. Robert Hunt, we were informed from SMU, is going to be coming in a few minutes. And then I was given Haifa Halawani from the INT Quranic Academy. Nice to have you. All right, let's give a big, huge Texas welcome for all these people. Thank you so much. I know not to leave anybody out, you know, behind every great teacher is always a great spouse, and we all know who's doing the real teaching, you know, behind the scenes. So we do, let's give a big hand to all the family members and spouses also who are here. And last but not least, we also have a number of volunteers who have helped to make this event a reality. Let's give the volunteers a big hand. Okay, so now the fun part. All right, we get to eat, and afterwards we'll be starting the program with some of our speakers. The way we'll do the food is we'll basically be forming a line where I'm in the direction I'm pointing. Okay, if I could have your attention, please. If I could have your attention, please. As you all are wrapping up your food, we do have a number of excellent speakers that we'd like to listen to, so we'll go ahead and start while you're finishing up. In the meantime, just a housekeeping announcement that some of the guests had come in these last few minutes. One is we'd like to welcome Brian Alexander, a chemistry teacher, if you could stand for a second, from Wiley High School, right? In the meantime, we also have Sabina Bawani, who's a teacher in the Garland ISD. If you could stand, where is Sabina? Oh, all right, thank you. She's also an active volunteer here. And then thirdly, we have Dr. Yasmin Ansari, who's a math professor at Collin College. Okay, thanks again for coming. We'll go ahead and start. Let me introduce our first speaker. She's a senior lecturer at UTD in the School of Interdisciplinary Studies. She's an award-winning educator who has taught a broad range of undergraduate and graduate courses in the areas of women's and gender studies, American studies, political science, communication studies, anthropology, international development, and sociology. She has both a PhD and master's degree from the University of Iowa and a BA from the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. She's produced a number of publications, and her research and teaching interests include poverty and public policy, international development, social change and activism, the family in America, reproductive technologies, motherhood, and educational practices and policies. Please give a big hand for Dr. Jillian Duquesne Watson.
You want a mic here?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this event. I am very, very humbled. You cannot hear me very well. I'm going to move this. Better? A little better? Okay. This is my first visit to the East Plano Islamic Center, and I am just delighted by the feeling of peace and community that is in this space. Diversity has long been a buzzword in institutions of education, including institutions of higher education. And I decided that rather than doing a more academic kind of presentation, that I wanted to talk about real stuff. Stuff that I've experienced, stuff that I'm sure some of you have experienced as well. We hear in institutions of education discussions of diversity that focus on the importance of having a diverse student body, the importance of having diverse faculty, diverse staff, and certainly about the benefits of including attention to diversity as a core feature of the work that we do in the classroom. Within American culture more broadly, I think that we seem to have this very unique way of conceptualizing diversity. And I say unique, meaning unique from what I've seen in other global contexts. In the United States, it seems that we have a very reductive way of thinking about diversity. What I mean simply is that the term diversity is used in a simplistic way to denote specific racial or ethnic groups, for example, specifically those that have been historically oppressed and marginalized. We also talk about diversity in relation to specific religious groups, again, those that are marginalized within mainstream social and political institutions. And we talk about diversity in relation to immigrant populations. Within the context of America, then, diversity is often used as a stand-in term for those groups that are regarded as not part of the mainstream, as a way of denoting otherness. Correspondingly, of course, such a usage of these kinds of terms assumes that anyone who is deemed to not be part of diverse groups then is, by default, categorized as part of the mainstream. Those groups are then, of course, assumed to share mainstream values, experiences, and goals. And it's this type of dichotomous thinking and categorization that plagues much of Western thought. I want to suggest that we actually work towards a much more nuanced understanding of diversity, one that works against those type of simplistic definitions and seeks to foster a more accurate understanding of and engagement with diversity as it truly exists, rather than as we reduce it to those kind of simplistic oppositional categories. If we seek to understand diversity as it really exists, then we need to incorporate something called intersectionality. That is, to recognize the way in which diverse identities interact with one another to create unique experiences, beliefs, and values for various groups. This means we move away from those stereotypes, the ones that many of us, if we are very honest, rely on from time to time to make sense of people that we perceive to be as not like ourselves. We have to move away from those kind of broad brushstrokes that are often used when we talk about and when we approach groups. For example, if we think about discussions of gender in American culture, we also often hear about differences between men and women, perceived differences. As part of this discussion, there are those that make claims about the needs of women, as though somehow you can categorize all women as having all the same needs, the same experiences, the same values, and the same perspectives. Such claims, and I'm looking at faces of women in this space who seem like they understand where I'm going with this, those kinds of claims are really inaccurate. Women are not a monolithic group. Men are also not a monolithic group. As an American-born woman of white European descent, for example, and someone who has a good degree of economic security due to my career, I have distinctly different experiences, perspectives, and potentially values than an Ethiopian immigrant woman to the United States, or a woman who is white American-born but does not share my economic privilege. If we're going to talk about diversity, we really need to tease it apart much more than we do typically. Part of what we have to do then, and part of what we must do, is work against those kind of dichotomous categories and against broad brushstrokes in our discussions of diversity. We must look at and attend to intersectionality and how each of us has experiences that are shaped at the intersection of various identities. Identities such as gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, religion, to name only a few. Why should we care about diversity as a core element of education? There's lots of reasons for this. You all just ate, and I imagine you're starting to fade a little bit, so I'm only going to talk about two. First, when we talk about educational spaces and what we hope to achieve for our students, I think it's essential that students, regardless of their major or their intended profession, are knowledgeable about diverse cultures so they're prepared to effectively and respectfully, and I would like to underscore respectfully, interact with and meet the needs of the diverse populations they will encounter. From this perspective, attention to diversity is simply good business sense. This is also true for those who will pursue careers in government and business, equally true for those who will go into teaching in healthcare, also true for those who will work in public, private, or nonprofit sectors. An example, in my global health course, I teach students about diverse world cultures and how various aspects of those cultures, different beliefs, different values, different customs, impact thinking about health and wellness and about illness. Why do students need to know those things? Quite simply, we live in a diverse society, and for those students who go on to practice medicine, whether they're physicians, surgeons, physician assistants, nurses, or if they're in dentistry or ophthalmology, anybody who as a healthcare provider is having direct contact with patients needs to know about diversity so that they don't adopt a one-size-fits-all model of education, so that they really tailor the kind of treatment that they provide to each individual patient. I'll give you an example. If they have a patient who's suffering from a respiratory infection, but who is from a cultural background that relies regularly on and incorporates what we talk about as CAMs, complementary and alternative methods. Examples of that would be things like cupping or coining that are really common in lots of Asian cultures, or the use of herbal remedies that we see very commonly in Latin American cultures. In that instance, a healthcare provider might find that the patient is resistant to the use of pharmaceuticals such as antibiotics. If a practitioner does not understand that CAMs are part of a patient's culture and of equal importance, if they cannot respect those methods and incorporate them into the healthcare plan for the patient, we are likely to see a couple of things that are not what we want to see in healthcare. One is patient noncompliance. The second is negative impact on health outcomes. We're likely to see an ongoing health issue with this individual. Understanding, respecting, and attending to patient's culture then, or as I explain it to my students, being culturally competent, it's not an extra. It's not an add-on that healthcare practitioners should include in their practice only if they have time or only if they are legally required to do so. Instead, it's an essential part of effective healthcare practice. It is based, again, on a rejection of that one-size-fits-all model and instead builds on a recognition of diversity. We could come up with similar examples, of course, if we were talking about other fields, teaching, for example, business. I also want to say that there is a social justice imperative addressed when we make diversity a core feature of education. Education that's inclusive and it addresses diversity helps prepare students to become active, engaged members of their communities once they leave institutions of education. They're simply more aware of diverse beliefs, diverse values, diverse practices, and as a result, they can avoid those kind of simplistic attitudes, those stereotypical attitudes toward various groups in favor of informed and accurate understandings of individuals, of communities who do not have the same cultural background that they do. It's from this point of understanding that individuals can then begin to work as informed, engaged as citizens and effectively respond to the contemporary challenges that are facing our communities. This is essential for working towards socially just, effective change in our increasingly complex, fast-paced, and pluralistic society. In addition, when we make attention to diversity a priority rather than an add-on, when we learn about the broad range of cultures and cultural groups that make up our communities, we take an important step towards not only recognizing those differences, but towards understanding them and authentically respecting them and understanding how they strengthen our communities. Put another way, when we attend to diversity, we promote respect, understanding, we create connections, and we build community. Thank you. I almost kept that.
Kidnapped you. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Jillian. That was very enlightening. Just in terms of housekeeping, I'm sure if some of you wanted to ask her questions or some of our other speakers, what we're going to do is basically hold off until after the prayer session that's mentioned on the agenda, and then you'll have a chance to basically ask any questions you want of any of the speakers and have basically a short panel discussion. Moving along, our next speaker is Dr. Michael Phillips. He is currently a history professor at Collin College. He has a PhD from the University of Texas, Austin, where he was a researcher at the Center for American History. He also has a degree in journalism and used to be a reporter for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. He is a scholar of Texas race relations and the author of the book White Metropolis, Race, Ethnicity, and Religion in Dallas, 1841 to 2001, which chronicles the history of Dallas, Texas during the first 150 years. This book won the 2007 Texas Historical Commission's Award for the best book on Texas history. In the meantime, in 2013, he's also co-authored 2 more books, one titled Imperial Presidents, The Rise of Executive Power from Roosevelt to Obama, and another history textbook called The American Challenge, A New History of the United States. And his latest book, which I believe he has brought, if you want to hold it up, he did bring a few copies. It's called The Texas Right. Dr. Phillips grew up right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in Garland. Let's give him a big Texas welcome.
Thank you. Hello? Okay, you can hear me? Good. I wanted to just start on an autobiographical note why I'm interested in the topic I'm going to be addressing. Earlier speakers spoke about knowledge, and I want to talk about a type of ignorance, which is Islamophobia. And this is actually how I got to know the Muslim community in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I grew up in Garland, Texas in the 1960s. At a time the town was extremely Southern Baptist, extremely Anglo, extremely conservative on a number of issues. And in my time, Catholics were the outsiders. And growing up in public school, I heard all the time about how the Pope was the Antichrist, and there'd be little pamphlets that say, are Roman Catholics Christians, and they pass that out. And I'd hear characterizations of the Catholic faith that I grew up in that didn't resemble the church I knew when I was brought to Mass by my parents. And so when I hear how some people speak of Muslims today, there's a real sense of deja vu, and it's unpleasant. And I think there are all sorts of elements. I think there's a racial element to it, and there were Catholics, I believe. And I think that I see a similar trajectory. Okay, so I want to talk about that, and let me just briefly note, I got to Collin College. It was the most diverse institution I had ever taught at. I was at UT Austin. Collin College is more diverse than UT ever was because it's become an elite school. And so I got to know some Muslim women in my classes, and they completely defied every stereotype that a lot of people have about women in Islam. And I put together a panel. There's one of my panelists is here today, and I had them talk about that. My students were amazed to hear how smart, how assertive, how independent, how creative. That these were women who were not oppressed, who had embraced the faith tradition and did so willingly. And I thought that was a useful thing. And so Islamophobia has been an issue I've been concerned with ever since. Now we don't know how many Muslims are targeted by hate crimes every year, although the evidence suggests it's a pretty significant issue. One 2014 Zogby poll indicated that Muslims are, next to atheists, the least popular group in terms of religion in the United States. Only 27% of Americans hold a positive view of Muslims, opposed to 45% who hold an unfavorable view. The FBI compiles statistics on hate crimes every year, and these are woefully underreported for reasons I'll mention. They say approximately 160 Muslims were victims of hate crimes between 2011 and 2013, and we know that the number's much higher. For instance, 2 out of 3 hate crime victims don't report the incident to police because various reasons. Number one, they're afraid nothing will happen if they report the crime. Number 2, they're afraid that they will be further victimized if they stand out and speak out against a crime of bias. Third, police have been involved in spying on Muslim communities. And there's racism within police departments that is sometimes directed towards people of Middle Eastern descent. So, there are a lot of issues why a Muslim may not report a hate crime in which they're the victim. Nevertheless, we know from the FBI stats that 14% of all hate crime victims are Muslims. And furthermore, one other little bit of research. Pew Research Center says that 6% of American Muslims report they had been physically attacked or insulted because of their religion. Now, if you understand that there are 2.6 million Muslims in the United States as of 2010. From that, we can extrapolate there are about 156,000 Muslims in the country who have been a target of verbal or physical abuse. And we've seen some really terrible incidents lately. This past February 10th, Stephen Hicks murdered 3 Muslim neighbors. 2 of them were women wearing the hijab in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And some people are saying, oh, it's because of a parking dispute. But other people are familiar with the case know that bias was undoubtedly an issue. There's, of course, been an upsurge in anti-Muslim and anti-Arab attacks since September 11th, 2001. Some of the victims, by the way, have been actually Sikhs who non-Muslims mistake for Muslims. And that's been a common phenomenon. On the anniversary, the 10th anniversary of September 11th, in Houston, you had a Muslim man enter into an establishment to get a sandwich. He was given a to-go box that had written on it, Happy September 11th, and the two ones in the 11 were drawn to look like the World Trade Center. And this is a fairly common experience on a smaller scale, I would suggest. Meanwhile, non-Muslims have been reduced to the status of second-class citizens. We saw this with the attempt to open Park 51 in New York, which was blocks and blocks away from the Twin Towers. And it was in a rundown neighborhood where there had been strip joints and other, disreputable things. And people are trying to build this community center. And you had this organized protests, how dare they do this? A place, an Islamic center, a community center. And the Constitution guarantees the freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and Muslims sometimes there have been people who tried to deny that. We saw this in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. There's a 4-year battle to open an Islamic center there. And the county in Rutherford County, Tennessee ended up having to spend almost $350,000 to battle off these lawsuits to prevent the exercise of a constitutional right that everyone else enjoys. One attorney, Joe Brandon, in Rutherford County says, I understand they want Sharia law in Rutherford County. What's wrong with that wanting to ask questions about direct ties to terrorism? What's the harm in that? What do we have to do? We have to undergo cavity searches in airports. Why? Because of the Muslims. And this is a fairly common thing in the media. Anyone watch Fox News? I don't recommend it. Have aspirin nearby. I'm worried about blood pressure, so I don't watch it. But anyway, a common guest on Fox News is a woman named Pamela Geller. Oh, you've heard of her. Okay. She's a founder of a group called Stop Islamization of America. And she has said in the past, and she's always on Fox News, she says, I don't think that many westernized Muslims know that when they pray 5 times a day, they're cursing Christians and Jews 5 times a day. I believe in the idea of a moderate Muslim. I do not believe in the idea of a moderate Islam, whatever that means, right? And she, by the way, is called what she sees as a struggle between the West, the Christian West, and Islam as a struggle between, listen to the words, the racism of the words, between civilized man and the savage. Have you heard of Ann Coulter? Yeah, she's another. These are heroes, right, in the right-wing media. She's referred to Arabs by the term ragheads, and she gets invited on Sean Hannity's show in spite of using a racist term like that. It is an acceptable form of racism. I mean, if someone frequently used the N-word, they would not be a guest even on Fox News. And so I find that really shocking. And then we have Bill Maher, who's the host of a cable show on HBO, who's compared Islam to the mafia. And I see this, and like I said, I really get a sense of deja vu. Because there have been other groups in American history who have gone through the same crucible. And I was a member of one of those groups. 1850s, if you were in the United States, there was a political party that actually challenged the major 2 parties. At that time, it was the Whig Party and the Democratic Party. It was called the American or Know Nothing Party. And this is a party that formed specifically because they were panicked about all those Catholic immigrants coming from Ireland primarily, but also from Germany. And if you read what they said, the Know Nothing said about Catholics, it is amazingly similar to what they say about Muslims today, the bigots say about Muslims today. One there's a newspaper called the Texas State Times in 1855. It said, "Imagine our Senate and cabinet composed of a majority of Catholics, and our glorious republic would be metamorphosed into a Catholic hierarchy. The Inquisition, the crucifix, the torture would be reared in the forum of justice. Our rivers would be red with the blood of Protestants. The Catholics openly call themselves anti-democratic, anti-republican, and they hold loyalty to a foreign leader." Does that give you a sense of deja vu all over again, as Yogi Berra said? More than 100 years later, there was a man in Dallas I read about in my White Metropolis book called W.A. Criswell, who was a pastor of First Baptist Church. And he was spending 1960 warning people of the dangers if John F. Kennedy ever became president. And he said that the Pope would control American foreign policy, American domestic policy. Eventually people would be coerced into converting to Catholicism. And it reminds me a lot of the complaints about Sharia law today. I really do feel that, Criswell said in one sermon, he said, "The Pope has full power of true jurisdiction over all the faithful, and hence has the duty and the right to guide, direct, and correct them on the plane of action ideas. The Church has the duty and the right to intervene, even in the political field. In every section of his activities, the Pope," he's talking about, "he must inspire private and public conduct by laws, orientation, and instructions of the Church." In other words, the Pope is going to impose Catholic Sharia law in the country. Now, Jews faced a similar situation when they came over, particularly in large numbers, beginning in 1880 until 1920, and the imposition of the strictest anti-immigration law in U.S. history in 1924. You had people warning of the undermining of the American economy, the conquest of the American economy by Jewish immigrants. One workman in the late 1800s said, "The Russian Jews and all the other Jews will completely control the finances or government in this country in 10 years, or they will all be dead." This is in a speech. He's predicting either they'll conquer or Gentiles will have to commit genocide out of self-defense. The hatred with which they, the Jews, are regarded ought to be a warning to them. The people of this country won't be starved and driven to the wall by Jews who are guilty of all the crimes that have hitherto been unknown and unthought of by civilized humanity. So this is a common thing. In the 1930s in America, you would hear Father Charles Coughlin on the radio warning about Jews. You'd hear Charles Lindbergh, who was a famous aviator, speak about the dangers of Jews, etc. Now, real quickly, let me just say that the good news is that those other groups faced a similar hostility, and they eventually became accepted in the American fabric. For instance, the number of Americans who said they would vote for a Jew for president went up from 46% in 1937 to 91% in 2012. Those who would consider voting for a Catholic, in 1937 the numbers were only 60%. 40% said they would never consider it. It went up to 67% a couple of years before Kennedy was elected, to 94% in 2012. Well, right now, 58% of Muslims, or 58% of Americans said they would consider a Muslim for president. So you're ahead of the Catholics and Jews were at the similar point in American history. Perceptions change. Real quickly, one last thing I would say. There is an element of race to this. I will explain. The Irish, Italians, and other groups that were Catholic in the past were perceived as non-white in the 19th century. And I think that Islam is often considered a religion of people of color. And I think that's an element. So it's entwined with our race relations, which are very troubled. I would just say, as Muslims become involved in the media, in public institutions, as they run for office, there will be a change. It's going to be a painful one, but change will come. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Phillips. Meantime, I just wanted to quickly welcome a few people who also came in the meantime. Lisa Sudak from Wiley High School. Is she here? Oh, there's she. Okay, right in front of me. Okay. Anita Murak from Wiley High School as well. Oh, thank you. Phyllis Harris, a student from SMU. Is he here? Phyllis? Oh, there. Okay, very good. And then, of course, to my right, Dr. Robert Hunt has also come in from SMU. We'll be introducing him in a minute. In the meantime, we'll continue to move along. Our next speaker is Dr. Shazia Ali. She is currently a professor of English literature at Eastfield College. I did get it right this time. She is also an adjunct instructor at UNT and Collin College. She has a PhD in English literature, a master's degree and a bachelor's degree from UT Dallas, where she graduated magna cum laude. She teaches classes in the areas of English composition, rhetoric, American literature, world literature, and cultural studies. She received a teaching award at Richland College and has been nominated for teaching awards at Eastfield College, as well as UTD. Please give a big hand to Dr. Shazia Ali.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay, can you all hear me? All right. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with everyone here. I see some lovely girls waving their hands at me. They're my Sunday school students. I want to start with a story. About 8 years ago, when I was adjuncting at Collin College, I was a humanities professor there. I was teaching a humanities class, and there was a student there who used to sit at the back of the class. He was a very young man, about 19 years old, and he would just sit at the back of the class and be completely disengaged with everything I was teaching. He would sit quietly there, just observing, and usually would have a very disapproving frown on his face. So as teachers, we know that we have students like that everywhere, all the time, right? So we look at them and we try to get them engaged with the class, but to no avail. He wouldn't be interested at all. When you teach humanities, one of the sections that you teach is world religions. So basically, I was teaching Judaism, Christianity, and Islam from a historical perspective. That didn't go down very well with him. Because obviously I was an openly practicing Muslim. At the end of the semester, I thought that this one, I've lost him. I didn't do anything. I couldn't do anything for him. He passed the class. He obviously couldn't afford to drop the class, so he did pretty well. He was an average student. But after he took his final exam, he walked up to me and he said that, you know, Professor Ali, I think that I've seen lots of women like you who dress so strangely, and in malls and different places. And I said, I see. And he said, you know, they wear that thing on their head. And I smiled at him and I said, well, you can call it a headscarf, or the proper terminology is hijab. And he goes, yeah, that thing. Some you can't win. But he looked at me and he said, you know what? Whenever I came across these women, I would not even meet their eyes because they make me nervous. I don't want to talk to them. But after being with you for 4 months, I think I might say hello to them now. And I said, okay, well, that's great. Okay, but that's not the end. That's not the end of it. That's not the end of the story. Okay, so I said, all right. And then he had to follow it up quickly with, you know, I disagree with everything you stand for. And I said, okay, that's fair enough. I completely disagree with everything you stand for. And then he gives me this look and he says, but I like you. I looked at him and I said, you know, Joe, you don't have to agree with someone to like them. You don't have to agree with someone to, you know, to respect them. You don't have to agree with someone to be kind to them. And the expression on his face was one of, oh, I get it. And that's the only time in the course of the whole semester he had that expression on his face. So everything else I taught him, he forgot. But I hope, 8 years later, I still hope that he remembers that part. He remembers that part, hopefully. In the Quran, there is a verse that every practicing Muslim family teaches their child, no matter what. And all the Muslim faces are probably going to smile because they've been teaching their child this verse, and especially when the exams are close. It is in Arabic, it is Rabbi Zidni Ilma. It basically is almost a prayer. Oh Allah, oh God, increase my knowledge. Now, when we think of the word knowledge, we have a real difficulty in understanding what knowledge is, because it is basically a number of things. It's not one thing. Do we have any math teachers here? Could you raise your hand? Yeah. All right. When you teach math, you are basically teaching them how to solve a word problem, right? You're going through those steps, but you're also teaching them something else. You're teaching them patience. The patience to go through those word problems step by step and learn how to be patient through this process. History professors, we teach them accountability, right? We teach them that every action has a reaction. You have to be responsible for something at some point. That happened in the past, and it's going to happen in the future. Science professors, science teachers, we teach them humility as they learn that there are different things happening inside our body. In geology, there are different things happening outside this world. We are basically saying, we're teaching them humility, that there is so much we learn, but there is so much we still don't know. I'm an English teacher, and guess what I make my students do? I make them write essays. Who loves writing essays here? I have a few random hands, and I'm sure you're all grad school students. That's why you love writing essays. Okay, my students don't love writing essays. They hate it. And when they write essays, and they write it, and I give it back to them to revise, and to re-edit, and to proofread, and to just do, the same essay. They have to fix it 8 times. You know what I teach them? Perseverance. You have to have perseverance. You have to be able to be there to get through this, to be able to write an essay. The point being that there are so many things that we teach them inside our disciplines, and as educators, I think we all know this. We all know that we teach them a number of other things. One of the things that I had a real challenge teaching in my classroom is tolerance. How do you teach tolerance in the classroom? And I came up with a 3-step process. Okay, I did not come up with it. I really did not come up with it. When in doubt, as you can see, I'm a practicing Muslim. When in doubt, I go back to the Quran. I go back to the book that helps me every time I'm stuck with something. And there's a chapter in the Quran, chapter 49. It's a really short chapter, about 18 lines. And that chapter helped me understand, how do I teach tolerance in the classroom? And it gave me a 3-step process. So the first step was basically destroying the stereotypes. Destroying stereotypes. When I walk up in a classroom, every semester, every 4 months, I have 200 new students. So I walk up into a classroom and I stand before them and I'm their English professor. How do you think that goes down? Probably not a single Muslim student in the class, because I do teach in a different area, and they don't look very happy, and they're just a little confused until I open my mouth. And because they think I'm going to speak with a very thick accent, they're not going to understand anything I say. And then he is Hispanic. He is about 2 inches shorter than I am, and we were discussing sports one day in class. And I see some smiles. You know where this is going, right? So we were all talking about, can you guess what sport this person plays? So what do you think they all guessed about him? Soccer. There you go, soccer. Everybody said soccer. He was offended. He said, I play basketball. And we were just like, really? We couldn't believe it. But those are the stereotypes that we automatically make in our minds every time we meet someone. And I do it too. I mean, just like all of you, I do it all the time. And we have to break those stereotypes. We have to get beyond that, to be able to look at people for who they are and not for what we assume them to be. The second one is, exhibiting good manners. Now you may think that the pleases and thank yous come very easily, and they probably do come very easily to the people in this room. I teach at a community college in Mesquite, Texas, south of Dallas. Most of my students come from challenging social and economical backgrounds. I have students who have zero family support. I have students who have drug addicts for parents. I have students who are recovering drug addicts. And I have students who've never been taught that when you need help, you can ask. So they look around and they don't understand and they become sullen and they just sit with their head down in the back because they don't know how to ask. I don't understand this, can you help me? They just don't know something that simple. So teaching them those good manners, teaching them that you can raise your hand, teaching them to say thank you, or even smiling at the person sitting next to you. They don't even do that until I tell them, can you please smile at the person sitting next to you? And they all have this fake smile and do it. But I do it 20 times in a semester until the 21st time when they do it naturally. And so, yes, I teach English, but sometimes I feel like I'm in kindergarten because of the fires that I'm putting out. The third point that I found that was helpful for me in the Quran was building community. Building community in the classroom and outside the classroom. What we're doing here right now is essentially that. We're building community. We're trying to create a space where we can care for one another, we can understand one another, and yes, even if we don't agree on certain things, we can respect one another and be kind to one another. I have a lot of community building exercises in my class, and again, I don't have the time to go through those right now, but just an example of what community building can do especially for underprivileged students. There was this young man in my class about 4 years ago, and midway through the semester, he just stopped coming to class, just stopped. And so it was a twice-a-week class, Tuesday, Thursday. He didn't come to class on Tuesday, and we were all like, okay, where's Patrick? And a couple of his friends were texting him. He didn't respond. On Thursday, he didn't show up again. And so now that was concerning because in my classes, attendance is a big thing. And for him to miss 2 classes was just very serious. And so his 3 or 4 of the other students, who were not even friends with him, who were not even close friends with him, came up with him and decided that, okay, we're going to find out where Patrick is, because he didn't show up for a whole week. It was pretty nerve-wracking for everyone. So all they knew was that he worked at a Walmart in Mesquite. That's all they knew about him. So these students, these 4 students, a young lady and 3 men, they, over the weekend, went to every single Walmart in Mesquite and at different times of the day to find out if they could catch him at some point. They finally caught him at a Walmart and they asked him, dude, why are you not coming to class? And this guy said, just because. Why are you guys here? You're stalking me. And they said, no, we're concerned about you. We want you to come to class. And so he decided to come to class the following. He was pretty mad. He came and told me, he said, I don't like these guys showing up at my work trying to find out where I was. And I said, yes, but you came back to class, didn't you? And he said, yes, I did, because I don't want them showing up at my work again. So, and I asked him, why were you not coming back? Was something happening? And he said, no, I just didn't feel like it. And that's what happens to a lot of community college students. They just stop feeling like it, and they drop out of school. And when you build this kind of community, they bring him back. Somebody will bring him back, because I could call him all I wanted, but he wouldn't come back. But these students, these peers went and brought him back, and that created the perfect community that you hope for. And those are the success stories that we as educators love to talk about, right? There are some not successful stories as well, but I'm not going to talk about those. So this is a feel-good moment, right? Okay, so essentially the whole idea of teaching tolerance in the classroom, I got it from the Quran. And it's not something that's new, but I think it's something that can definitely be taken outside the classroom as well. It can be taken in board meetings, when you have your plenar board meetings and everything. It's about caring for one another. It's about creating a space where everyone is comfortable. And really, at the end of the day, as I told Joe, my student, it's not about agreeing with one another. It is about being nice to one another, being kind to one another, and most of all, respecting one another. Thank you.
I'm going off.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shazia Ali. In the meantime, I'd also like to welcome Dr. Kadir Kazi, Professor of Physics at Richland College. Give a big hand to him as well. Thank you. So we've had people coming in and out all throughout the day, I guess. That's good. In the meantime, our next speaker, and then we're going to be having a short break after that, is Dr. Robert Hunt. He's to my right. Dr. Robert Hunt is the Director of Global Theological Education and Director of the Center for Evangelism and Missional Church Studies at Perkins School of Theology at SMU. He teaches courses in world religion, mission studies, cultural intelligence, and Islam in contemporary societies and states. Dr. Hunt received his PhD from the University of Malaya, studying Christian-Muslim relations in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He has a Master's of Divinity from SMU and a Bachelor's from the University of Texas. His research interests include interfaith dialogue. I know he's been a very active member in that area. Many of our members of East Plano Islamic Center are very thankful to you for that too, and I've just participated in a dialogue with him and some of his students, as well as contemporary Muslim movements, theology of religions, Christian identity in a pluralistic world, as well as world Christianity. Please give a big hand to Dr. Robert Hunt.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to be here and aware that prayer time is coming, so I will keep my remarks short. We all know from the work, many of you will actually know just anecdotally what Stephen Prothero has shown in his better research, which is that Americans of all ages are profoundly ignorant about different religions. And that includes, by the way, Christianity. We just almost know nothing. And there's some reasons that this has developed in our society. Some of them have to do with schooling. Some of those of you who are teachers have experience. There are some legal obstacles to teaching about religion in the classroom, especially a public school classroom. There's some sense sometimes that it's irrelevant. When I was going to school in Richardson, junior high and high school, Richardson called itself a city of churches. Our big issue was coming to grips with segregation, racial segregation. We were not actually even thinking about the fact that there might be Buddhists or Hindus or Muslims around. Now, the city of churches that I left to move overseas in 1985 has become a city of mosques and churches and Zen meditation centers. In fact, just to give you a little wink at how much society has changed, I grew up in First United Methodist Church, Richardson. The building that I grew up in, which is a very substantial sanctuary, chapel, and physical plant for education, is now entirely run by a Buddhist center. Where I used to worship is now a meditation hall. And that sat 2,000 people. We're not talking little, right? A lot of stuff has changed. I mean, actually there's another big change there, which is First Baptist Richardson moved out on the highway and was taken over by an African American Baptist church, and I don't think any of its members ever thought that would happen either. So, okay, sorry about that if you're Baptist. But yeah, Richardson has changed. Plano's changing, Frisco changes, the society's changed, and what at one time didn't seem very important has become very important. And what at one time seemed to be beset with legal obstacles, we just have to overcome, because we cannot live in a society in which we don't know anything about each other. And because, why? Well, because ignorance begets fear. And that's the other big characteristic of American society with regard to non-Christian religions and even sects within Christianity. There's some excellent Pew research on this, but American Christians typically do not have a high regard for any religion other than their own, but they frequently have a low regard for their fellow Christians of a different sort. And again, that's maybe ignorance. I teach students at a master's level. The majority of my students are students who are planning to practice Christian ministry. Okay? okay? They all have a bachelor's degree, and normally a bachelor's degree in arts. But when they come into my world's religions class, most of them know nothing. They've never met a Muslim, a Hindu, or a Buddhist. They know nothing about it because that particular requirement that was once the hallmark of a humanities degree is gone from undergraduate teaching. It's an elective for the most part. Now, I've got to say, in fairness to them, they don't really know much about Christianity either. If they come from a Pentecostal tradition, they don't know about mainline Protestantism. They've never heard of Mormons, if you want to include Mormons among Christians. They don't know Jehovah's Witnesses, so the sort of fringe groups from a mainline perspective. They don't know Catholics. If they're mainline Protestants, they've never heard of Pentecostals. They know very little about Catholics. Nobody has heard of the Eastern Orthodox because they're Eastern. So we're working in a sea of ignorance, right? And that ignorance then breeds the fear that we see today. Because all of us are afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of people that don't look like us, that are unfamiliar to us, who have customs and habits that we don't recognize. That's just natural. That's just natural. And part of the task of educators, of course, is trying to overcome that. And I'm going to suggest very quickly, I'm going to look at my clock. I think we ought to be on time is good, yeah. I'm going to suggest very quickly that there's two ways to do that. And the first is just knowledge. We just have to have knowledge about other religions at some basic level. And that doesn't have to be deeply ideological. It does, you know, it is relatively simple, actually, from my perspective, to teach about Islam. Now, I will tell you that I have taught a 3-semester introduction to Islam. I've taught long, long courses on Islam. That's the one religion of all of them that I've studied the most. But it can also be done in 2 or 3 hours, pretty easily. At the basic factual level that a non-Muslim needs to know things. What are the pillars of faith? What are the basic beliefs? What is some of the history of Islamic civilization, right? These things don't take a million years. What is the Quran, really? I would say, what is Sharia, really? These things can be taught. Knowledge is essential. And that means you tell the truth about things and you give the facts about things. I got an award about 5 years ago from an Islamic group here in Dallas, and I was a little bit surprised at the dinner when I was given the award because I couldn't figure out what I had done. And I said, so what have I actually done to deserve this award? And one of them said, well, you actually told the truth. And that, you know, that seems like such a small bar to jump over, right? It's just to tell the truth. But that's big. But the second thing, and I think this is true of all levels, whether we're teaching in primary school or we're teaching for high school, teaching junior college students, university students, master's level students, there's nothing more important than fascination. The way that we overcome fear and ignorance is to become fascinated by people who are different than ourselves. I spoke yesterday at one of the TED Talks at SMU, and the theme of my talk was, if you're going global, you need to fall in love. You need to fall in love with people who are different than yourself, with ideas that are different than yourself. Because our own culture, our own religious culture, is buried deep in our own hearts. And it determines everything about what is us normal and abnormal, what foods taste good and what foods are revolting, who looks suspicious and who looks trustworthy. These are all matters of the heart. And you can fill the head with everything. But until the heart changes, there's still going to be that fear and worry. And so the task for a teacher is to make people fascinated with other people. Make people fascinated with religious difference. So not to say, oh my gosh, all these women are wearing headscarves. I'd ask a different question. Why are they different colors? Right? Or better yet, different styles. I mean, I've lived in a lot of different areas of the world, in a lot of different Muslim countries. I don't think I'm that good, but I think that I could probably relatively easily tell the difference between a Malaysian, an Indonesian, and a Turk, just from the back and the way the headscarf is made. There are national fashions in headscarves, right? Some of our Turkish friends once called themselves the coneheads. So that, you know, let's look at, don't look at the scarf, let's ask what's interesting about it. What makes these clothes, why are these clothes worn the way they're worn? Why do men wear these little white hats? Or sometimes not white hats? What does that mean? Why are some Muslim men dressed in this kind of outfit and some in this kind of outfit. Well, that's kind of interesting, right? Why do people wear beards? What about henna? All of these small things that seem to be unrelated directly to the facts of Islam are part of what makes Islam or Hinduism or Buddhism fascinating. It captures our imagination. It makes us want to know more about how that works. And I think when we both have facts, when we have truth and we have facts, and when we have fascination with people who are different than us, they're not a problem, they're something to be fascinated with, then that begins to enter the heart. People can fall in love with diversity, they can fall in love with different cultures. It may be hard to do at an elementary level, but I told the college students that basically if they're going to another country for the first time, they have to act as if they're going on a first date, right? No, seriously. When you're going on your first date, you want to know a little bit about the person that you're going on a date with, because people appreciate it when you know something about them. Not too much, that's creepy, but a little bit, you know. And then you want to kind of be charming on the first date. You want to mind your manners. You have to know the etiquette that's involved. And there's some etiquette involved when we meet people from another faith, but maybe in particular Muslims. Not all Muslim women want to shake a man's hand, right? Some do, not all do. So you don't want to always, I always tell my friends, when I teach cultural intelligence, I tell them, if you're meeting Muslims, okay, and if you're a woman and meeting a man or a man meeting a woman, you don't really know whether this is a handshake kind of thing or not, okay? So what you want to do is to be ready for an alternative. So you sort of start to reach out your hand, and if the other hand doesn't come, you go, so happy to meet you. Fly on my face. Yeah, that just these little things then can become the way into our hearts. We move from facts to love, and I think when we do that, then we're going to be able to see that in our society as a whole, the fear begins to disappear. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hunt. Let's give another big round of applause to all of our speakers. Very good. All right, so some of you may have seen on the agenda sheets on your tables that we're basically going to be breaking just for about 10 minutes, where some of you probably know that Muslims have 5 daily obligatory prayers. We have the second one coming up pretty much right now. We pretty much, again, talking about cultural and religious awareness, Muslims always design our programs around prayer times and not the other way around. So anyway, we're just going to be going for a few minutes to the adjacent prayer hall. All of you are welcome to observe us if you'd like. If you don't want to go over there and you just like to stay here and have some more baklava or a cake and just chit-chat amongst yourselves, you're also more than welcome to do so. But we're basically going to be proceeding over there, and then when we come back within about 10 minutes or so, we'll be having a Q&A session as well as plaque distribution. If I've been informed too, yeah, that if any of you absolutely have to go right now, we do have plaques for our special guests, so just let any of the volunteers know. Any other announcements? Yes. Yeah, so basically when we do go out, we'll go out that door that I'm pointing at. We have some volunteers who will accompany you if you want to observe us prayer. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back here in about 10 minutes. Thank you so much.
Dr. Hunt, thank you. That was a great talk.
Thank you very much. I appreciate yours. All right, let's go ahead and start. In recognition of some of our guest speakers, we do have a plaque presentation. As you've already seen, a number of our other guests have also received plaques. Again, we want to thank all of you for being here. What we'll do is we'll hand out the plaques. He'll be taking pictures, and then after that we'll have a Q&A session. All right? So the first speaker today, who was it? Who was our first speaker? Dr. Jillian. Come on, we got to get that right. Dr. Jillian Duquesne Watson. All right, our next speaker was Dr. Michael Phillips. The next speaker was Dr. Shazia Ali. And then our final speaker was Dr. Robert Hunt. Okay, excellent. Let's give them all one more big round of applause for everybody. I know we'll let some of our speakers probably finish their food. They're still working on dessert, while some people had 3 pieces of cake already. All right. So the way we're going to do the Q&A, we do have a wireless microphone. What you can do is basically raise your hand. We'll bring you the wireless microphone. And then we'll basically treat it like a panel discussion where please address which speaker you'd like to ask the question to. And then we have them all up here. We'll proceed that way, all right, over the next few minutes. So do you have the wireless mic? Or okay. All right, do we have the first question?
This is my favorite, well, I have a couple of favorite professors out there, but
okay.
I wanted Dr. Julian a little bit to speak about how she sponsored our Muslim group and how hard it was for us to get a sponsorship in UTD, but I wanted you to say something a little bit about
nothing political?
Nothing.
I'm not sure what to say about that, except that was something that your group came to me with, and a number of the young women who decided. I can talk about.
Oh yeah, it'll be easier. Can you come up? I'm sorry.
Maybe.
Sorry, because it's taped down. That's why. Sorry about that.
Thank you. A number of the young women who are part of the group, who are part of the leadership of that group, had been in classes with me previously, and came to me in my office. I think expecting the same response that they had gotten from some other faculties at the institution. And I had sponsored a number of other student organizations in the past and was absolutely delighted that they had asked. And there was just a collective sigh of relief. Like I could see their shoulders drop down. I don't think that that is acceptable for any institution. This is where I have to be really careful because I want to keep my job. I am disappointed that it took your group having to go to so many individuals to find someone who was willing to support you in the ways that you deserve to be supported. But I'm also going to say that I feel like it worked out for both of us. Because I'm really, really delighted to be part of that organization, a dynamic group of young women, high achieving. I learn stuff from all of you all the time. So I feel like it worked out for us in the end. We are.
Great, thank you so much. All right, other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Okay, this could be addressed to any one of you. A number of you spoke about the subject of diversity and provided us with very good insights as to how to bring in diversity, how to explain diversity, how to engage with people of different backgrounds. Now with that said, as you know, in some schools, in the English literature class, some material that are being taught can be very offensive to students. One such example is Dante's Inferno or the Divine Comedy. It shows Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, being tortured in the hell. Now, how as a teacher do you deal with that material, and how do you deal with the students, Muslim students who are in that class and who are undergoing through a kind of a passive torture, because they see their belief there, something that is so central to their belief is being attacked so viciously, albeit in the name of literature and in the name of fiction. But how do you deal with that? And any one of you could respond to that.
Good.
That's a good question. When I did my first book on Dallas, I'd read Ku Klux Klan literature, I'd read neo-Nazi literature. I was constantly exposed to material that I found offensive. And I think it's key to understanding is to confront that, to face this is a legacy of the West, that this is part of Western culture. And I think that attitude that you see in Dante Alighieri's work is, it's filtered through the present day. And I think it shows how deeply rooted that is. And there is wisdom in confronting that directly. And I understand why it's painful, but it's also, I think maybe you say, okay, I see when I'm listening to someone like Ann Coulter, there's 800 years of Western culture behind that. And, it's difficult, but I think that there's value in and of itself, even when it is offensive. Maybe we should look at it because it is offensive, just like we look at, the Holocaust, or we look at something like that.
Can I just? Oh, yeah. No, you can just hold it. Just hold it. So, I think that's actually Dante's Inferno is a very interesting book because it's a pre-modern book now taught in a modern context, and there's two things about it I think that need to be taught. One is to locate it as pre-modern, and the second is to say that if we still lived in a pre-modern era, then we would probably ban it. It wouldn't be a comfortable or healthy book for society. One of the aspects of living in the modern world or a post-Enlightenment world is that we place things historically and therefore to some extent we discount them. I think this is particularly problematic for students who come from many different religious backgrounds because they're looking at literature that speaks against their religion for the very first time and they find it offensive, and they say, well, why are you presenting offensive material? And part of the reason for that is the Enlightenment, by its very nature, tries to separate the offense from the fact that it's a piece of literature and that kind of thing. And as Dr. Phillips said, it's not very difficult to find that literature. I'll have to be very honest with you. It's quite easy to find in Islamic literature from the Middle Ages very, very viciously anti-Christian stuff. In fact, what's really quite amazing when you go through the Arab apologists that wrote from about the 11th century to the 13th century, Christians, Muslims, and Jews had an incredibly vigorous debate in Arabic about the truth. And what's amazing is that all three groups would write this stuff at each other and not kill each other. And none of this stuff would have been publishable today. It's amazing. And so, but what that then tells you is something about the social context in which that took place. That was the way in which you had debates, that you had these polemical arguments. And I think this is where locating something in its context is very helpful to say, at a time that polemic was carried on in this way, this book was written, right? By the way, there's a lot of other people besides the Prophet Muhammad burning in Dante's hell, right? Some of which would be offensive to other people. That's the way the argument took place, but then also to understand that we're in a society in which, for better or for worse, and I think many Muslims may think for worse, blasphemy is acceptable. It's not only acceptable, it's a mark of religious freedom, right? And so to understand fully the social context, you have to not only understand, well, who was Dante and why did he write that way, but you also have to understand why Dante could be studied today. Or why, for example, we would read Martin Luther talk about a polemicist. He doesn't say, or the English Puritans. You should see what they write about Catholics, right? So it helps, I think, to understand that we're in an Enlightenment environment. It's a very different social, political environment than than we've been in. But it is still painful, and I think for the teacher who's working through that that kind of study, a great deal of sensitivity is necessary. Okay, that's all I can say. Yeah.
I would just like to add a little bit. Historical context is everything. I mean, historicizing a text in the time that it was written in is so important. I mean, if we look at N-word, right, and there's so many slave narratives, every black person can stand up and say, we cannot read Faulkner, what he's written, or even go back in time. But we need to recognize history, that this, using the N-word and the way slaves were treated, was part of the fabric of American society. So by reading those texts, you're confronting it and you're acknowledging this is what happened in history, and now we are at a different place. So a disconnect needs to happen. And I think that's where we as Muslims or Jews or African Americans or anybody else takes it very personally, where the text is really just illuminating something that's taken place in the past. And banning books, I think, would resist the whole idea. I mean, we can't discard the fact that yes, there was enmity between these factions. Dante was against Muslims, or other. There was Ku Klux Klan, and history will show itself in literature, and that's really the purpose of literature. So, just wanted to add that.
So thank you, Sister. I think the difference here probably is more to the fact that it is being taught as literature, not as history, because from an historical perspective, we can build on that context of whatever of when that was written. And that is a very interesting question, and I appreciate that, because that is a challenge. And it is a challenge for all of us, especially administrators. Is what sort of guidance is given. This comes from the state level, and then the choices that have to be made as far as books. And there is more to this in the more recent changes in the history books related to the word jihad and things of that nature that are coming down, which is also becoming a challenge. So it'll be interesting for us to talk about how do you administrators handle these kind of things. I mean, because and I'm looking at our friends over here in the PIZ because at the college level it's a different kind of thinking, right? We're dealing with students and professors who are adults. But then when you are dealing with kids down at, from a much younger, you are actually building the type of thinking that they will grow up with. So this, and we would like to help, but this is not a question in a way that you have to answer this right now. But this is a way for you all to also hear us, to say that we are sometimes concerned about these things, and we would also like to have some input into how the decision-making processes and also to allow for you guys to hear the community that we are sometimes are concerned about these things to a large extent, and it's not just the Muslim community; it's also lots of other communities as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Premature in my education to say this, but I think in terms of literature that is offensive, a lot of offensive things are deeply entrenched in our society, just in general. Racism, sexism, homophobia, like every single issue is constantly re-entrenched in our system of education, our systems of religion, and systems of our prison industrial complex. So just every thought we have is constantly in a bias, and I think that it might be true that Dante's Inferno has a lot of issues that are inappropriate to people of certain religions, but I also think it's important to understand that those things are what happened in society, not as a historical point of view, but the fact that people didn't want to, the fact that people don't realize that these things are offensive. So it's not just about banning the books that I think should be done, but I think these issues should be addressed while reading Dante's Inferno, discussing issues of offensive comments made by these authors, and like reevaluating the fact that our mindsets are constantly biased towards certain groups that are different from us, and that's what needs to be explained, and that's something that needs to be talked about. And so it's not just about the book, it's about our mindset that needs to be shifted. So perhaps it's a bad thing for that book to be read in class, but then I think just talking about those things shouldn't be ignored. You should say, yes, that's offensive. You should speak out and say, I feel offended by this. I think this is a bad thing. And that way, we can promote discussion rather than being quiet and sitting by passively and banning things that we find offensive. It's important to acknowledge these things and talk about it, not just deny it. I mean, like, history is important to learn about, but for us to talk about things is the only way to promote social change, because that is how you find solutions. That's how we talk about things. That's how we change mindsets, just naturally. That's how we change things throughout history, by talking about things, debating things, discussing things, changing everyone's mindsets that have been historically biased towards certain groups, like Muslims, Christians, Catholics, people who are gender fluid, women historically are always oppressed. Our mindsets constantly are biased against women. That is why in the workforce, women aren't hired as much as men. That's why they're not paid as much as men in the workforce. So it's important to realize that our mindset needs to shift through these resources that have been provided to us, these chances for you to talk about these issues, or chances to say, this is not right. I don't feel comfortable with this. This mindset needs to stop. This Islamophobia needs to stop. You need to understand that this is not who we are. Perhaps those people are who they are, but this is not a general group. We can't do group mentalities, because that's horrific, just in general, because people have different experiences, as Dr. Jillian said, and everyone has subjective thoughts, and no matter what, you're not going to experience anything else. So the only way to promote social change is through discussing and having these books read.
I love what you said. That was so amazing. Fabulous. I've been a student for so many years, and when my teacher was teaching Dante Inferno, I was in class and I was covered. You know, I was like, what are you saying? Who's it? I said, so he made an exercise which was fabulous, I thought. He said, he told us, who do you think should be in hell? You know? And I say Dante Inferno himself. You know? Dante Inferno and the people who commit all these crimes in the world, Hitler should be in there, and other people that I won't mention names right now should be in there. You know, those oppressive people should be in there. But literature, this is something which has been written years ago. And we as students have to learn, as Sarah said, or Aisha said, we have to stand up when things like this are said. We have to stand up and say things. You best believe it. If I'm in a class and they're teaching things like that, I stand up and say, excuse me? That's kind of, you know. And then the professors, I think, first, one thing we forgot to say, professors who teach the class make a whole bunch of difference when they teach those classes. And that's why we really appreciate some of the professors who teach classes, right? Because that professor makes a whole bunch of difference. When I was learning that Dante Inferno, my professor did a great exercise, and he let me talk about Islam, you know? And he told me to talk about the differences in Islam as well. And that was a privilege for me. So that's how I learned Dante Inferno and changed it to my perspective and taught the students about Islam itself. Appreciate it. And I love all the professors. Yes, I do.
Sure. Actually, this comes up for me once a semester. I teach the second half of U.S. history, and it's a similar issue that students find very upsetting. I teach an entire hour about lynching, in America. And I show the lynching photographs, and I read the contemporary newspaper accounts. And some of them are Southern newspapers, and they have the N-word in them, and they're graphic descriptions of what happens to the bodies of these black men usually who are murdered by mobs. And I've had a variety of students get very upset with that, you know, and I've had white students say, well, this is just a hate whitey course. I've actually had students say that it's about hating white people. I've had black students sometimes say, well, we know this, why do we have to do this again, you know? But I mean, if education is done correctly, at some point you're going to be upset. Because the world is an upsetting, unjust, unfair place. And to bluntly face the ugly sentiments. I mean, I have to decide when as a professor, when I read this, am I going to say the N-word or am I going to read the actual word? And I've decided in the classroom I'll say the actual word, because if I edit it, I'll make it prettier than it is. And I don't think they confront the truth that way. And I put myself in a vulnerable position. I've gotten complaints. But I said, this is what they said. And if I censor, you are not going to get the full flavor of how ugly it is. And I think the big problem is if a teacher does not put it in context and does not teach the consequences of Islamophobia, and you know that can be used for propaganda, you know that can be hurtful, and to invite a discussion about religious prejudice, that's where it becomes an issue. So the training of teachers is really important in that, but the material I think can actually be enlightening in a way Dante Alighieri never intended. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I know we had a long discussion on Dante's Inferno, which I don't know if that was intended, but if there's still other questions for any of the speakers, we'll probably wrap up with a couple more and then close. Any other questions for any of our guests before we close? No? All right, then we'll go ahead and close. Our Imam, Nadeem Bashir, just wanted to say a few very quick remarks, probably a couple minutes, and we'll close with a short prayer.
Once again, I just want to thank everyone for coming. This is the ending of our program. And I just want to once again just thank the volunteers for what a fantastic job they have done for putting this great event together, reaching out to all the teachers and the instructors, and trying to coordinate this program. The last thing I will say is this, is that here in this hall right now, we have a lot of teachers, we have people who are in boards. And the last thing, I just want to tell all of you that we all are truly blessed by God, because He has given us something that He has not given a lot of people, and that's knowledge. There's a lot of people who don't have knowledge, and I truly believe that they are deprived. And when God has given us such a great gift, you remember, all of you, I grew up here in this country, so I grew up watching Spider-Man a lot. And I remember when Spider-Man was just, before he became Spider-Man, his Uncle Ben told him something, that with great power comes what? Great responsibility. Okay? With great power comes great responsibility. And I remember when the first Spider-Man movie came out, I was actually looking for that line. I was looking for that line. It's like, is that line going to come up or not? And believe it or not, it did come. And this is something that I say to everyone, is that we have a great gift. But with that great gift comes great responsibility, and that responsibility is to hand it over to the next generation. We need to really inspire others. We can inspire others, and we can leave behind ourselves a great legacy. A legacy that when we leave from this world, people will continue to remember us because of that legacy. There's a saying I want to share with you, that legacy is not what's left tomorrow when you're gone. It is what you give, create, impact, and contribute today while you're here, and then happens to live on. So we can all leave behind a great legacy for ourselves. Remember, there are thousands, billions of people who have come and they have gone, but there are very few who have, that till today we remember them, and they left behind a legacy for us. And what we want to do as educators, because we have been given such a great gift, is leave behind a legacy that people will remember us. Not just our family members. Family members forget other family members, in fact. But we want others, people who are not related to us, to remember us for a legacy that we have left behind. Once again, thank you so much for all of you for coming today. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, and as you all leave, you can fill out the feedback forms if you haven't done so already. Thanks again.